Hello, and let's have a look at what's new in Houdini 21 when it comes to Apex nodes. So here I have the character that we used in the other videos, the pigeon, and we have the skeleton here and the model, and everything is the same from where we left it, except from one little thing, that is that I added a root joint here, a point, name it root, and merge it in. So it's this one, then it's simply the parent of the rest of the skeleton. So the first node we will have a look at is called the pack character. So if I write pack CHR here, and you see we have a character pack and Apex pack character. This is the new one that is made for our Apex workflow. And you can see here it has some color-coded inputs. This one is the model, skeleton, and the animated pose. Animated skeleton, that is. And here is the character stream. It's very similar to the old KineFX nodes, so this should be fairly intuitive. So let's connect our skeleton and our model. And for the settings here, the default names is usually what I like to name as well. So let's keep it at that. Now, if we go to the view state of this node, you can see that we get into the Apex animate view state, but now the character is gone. That's because we don't have any Apex nodes, but you can set up the boilerplate nodes fairly quickly by clicking here, add FK and bone deform components. This will create a base.rig geometry and promote all the skeleton joint as FK controllers. So here I want to just add translate, rotation, and scale to everything. And now we can actually test our rig already, which is pretty cool. Much faster than before. And there is also an unpack character. So write unpack and look for Apex unpack character. So let's say that for some obscure reason, we needed to modify the geometry. Let's put down just a noise. So attrib noise. Take this one, and maybe it's more fun to put noise on the position. Set this to 0 centered. Beautiful. So the modeler was really happy with this model update. And now we can just do pack character again. And we want to input the character stream and then simply override the model or the geometry. So now the rig still works, but the model has changed. All right, so let's go back to just having the pack character here. And let's talk about the new node called the rig builder. But before we add that, I want to disable adding the FK and bone deform components here, because in my experience, I found that it's best to add this directly in the rig builder. So let's do that. So let's just type rig builder, and we have this new node here. Connect the character stream, and now we get a pop-up with a warning saying the left side joints have negative scales. This is currently not supported. So you might remember from the previous videos that we used the skeleton mirror with the scale setting. So let's just set this back to rotation instead. And let's try to go to the rig builder again. And now that warning is gone. There is still another one, but I think this is just due to this not updating properly. So let's just continue. If you now try to enter the view state, you will get a new pop-up. And it just asks if you want to use the settings that it has extracted from the skeleton. And that is fine for now. So this is pretty cool. So here you have sort of a skeleton representation of the character. And here you have the final rig. So what this allows us to do is to edit the skeleton and the rig logic live while being able to test the result as we're working on it. So I think this has a lot of potential, and I'm really excited about this new feature. Before we get started, I want to change some settings. So let's go out of the view state. If you come up here, I like to have auto update enabled so that the rig on the side there will update automatically. And there are some buttons here that are good to be familiar with, especially this one called Reset Guides and this one called Reset Rig. So the guides are the skeleton that was on the left, and the right is the rig. So if you need to reset anything, that's where you do it. Another thing I want to do is to scale the joints up a little bit. They were a bit small, and just entered the state again. I'm not sure why it prompts you again for the same settings, but just hit OK. So I just wanted these controllers here to be a little bit larger, like that is fine. And let's move the rig a bit closer, like that. Okay, so now you can actually move the skeleton here, and the rig will still work. So you can see if you move it here on the left side of the character, it will be mirrored to the right side, and the node automatically finds the corresponding controllers for that. So let's say we wanted to add sort of a main controller here. You can simply click and drag from this component menu, take this root one, drag, and you want to let go on top of one of the guides. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, we made this new joint called root, so let's place it there. I like to call this main. Hit OK. And now we have this new thing on the guides, which means we added some rig logic. And on this side, where we have the evaluated rig, we now have controllers. So we have this main, and we have this layout controller. So what if I wanted to have an extra one? You can simply go to the settings here on the guides, and now you have this new sort of in the scene menu. So on this one, you can click and hold down and let go maybe over 3, and voila, we now have 3 controllers. And let's say we wanted to add IK setup to the legs. It's very simple. You simply take the leg component here and you drag it and you let go on the leg, hit OK. And now we have an IK controller. With the knee bending the wrong way, of course, to keep in line with the previous video. And now we have a cogwheel here, and this has the same effect. It expands into this custom menu. And by the way, this is new also in 21. You can make your own menus like this. It's a little bit too much to cover in this video, however, but yeah, it opens up a lot of cool interactive possibilities with the Apex rigs. So I'm really excited about that. But for now, let's enable stretching. So now you can stretch like that. And you can also blend between IK and FK, like that. And another new thing is now you can have animated visibility for controllers. You see the FK controllers disappear and the IK ones are enabled. Let's continue. What if we wanted to have some sort of spline setup for the neck? I've been testing a few things and I found that actually the spine setup was the best option. So let's drag it here and say OK. So now we can rotate it in sort of a spline way. And it has a bunch of settings, and you have the full functionality, of course, like you would have with the spine. So it's sort of like a IK FK hybrid with a spline setup, which is really neat. So this could be a nice way to rig the neck. A little note with some of these components. For example, the spine, here the names are hard-coded, so this is pelvis, etc. This is called spine mid. And it's not really practical to rename it if you're using this system. And also there is a limitation that you can only have one of them. So if I try to add the spine component to the tail here, it wouldn't work. So just be aware of that. But the whole idea with this component system is that you will build your own and have a library, or maybe there will be a shared library in the future and you can edit them yourself, write them with Apex script, for example, and then you can drag and drop them on your character. What's provided here is sort of a suggestion from side effects, and they're already really good. But just note this system is completely open and is designed for everyone to write their own stuff. And here you sort of have a really nice interface to combine it all together. I also want to mention that you have this build tab here, and this simply shows you all of the components that you have added. So if I wanted to delete the spine, I can go here and say delete. And now we are back to having the IK setup and the root controller. All right, so there is one last thing I want to show in the rig builder, and that is simply how to exclude joints from having an FK controller added to it. So if you go over here to settings, you can simply type the name of the controller here, in this case body 1. So let's add it to the FK exclude, and now the controller is gone. So that concludes the quick overview of the rig builder. The next node I wanted to have a quick look at is the Apex configure controls. So this is not a new node, obviously, but it has a nice quality of life improvement, which is this plus button here. So what you can do is, say we wanted to change the shape of this controller here, you can select it, click this plus button, and now it's added here. So instead of typing it, you can select and click there. I think that is a nice improvement. So let's override the shape, choose the circle wires, set the shape offset, and I want to manually set the scale. So now we have a nice hip controller for our character. So now let's have a look at the last thing I wanted to show, and that's the fuse graph setup. So you can plot down an Apex auto component node and set it to fuse graph. And here you can see that it has some settings. We will use this exclude nodes tag, which is called reference. I also want to use the mirroring functionality. And as you might remember, we are using lowercase l and r as the prefix for the sides. So let's change that. Now let's connect the character stream. And it asks if you want to use the guides. In this case, we want to. The fuse graph uses the secondary input here, where we will connect an Apex graph node. And new in Houdini 21, you can simply connect the character stream, and now you will have the stashed Apex graph here. And you can also click this icon here to open the Apex graph, which is quite handy. And now hit L to see all the nodes laid out. So what we want to do now is to do some manual changes here. And everything that has not been changed, we want to tag with this reference tag so that it is not evaluated when it's trying to sort of look through all the nodes and see what's changed. So that is an optimization. So let's connect this to the secondary input, and now we can start to do some manual work on the rig. So for this example, I want to change the IK-FK blend controller from being this slider here into just a normal transform object that is parented under the body controller. So let's first find the body controller. I can take the body one, that's fine. I like to pull them off to the side here so that it's easy to select the one I haven't tweaked. And let's make a transform object. And I want to have one to use for offsets, so let's just make 2. And this is the parent. And let's call this L underscore IK FK switch offset. Copy this name. And this is the controller. And I want to promote the translation. Let's rename T. It's important to have this prefix on all the new nodes so that the mirroring function in the fuse graph works properly. Now I want to find the node for the IK FK switch. And the best way to find it is to look at this cogwheel, and the name and is L underscore leg underscore config. So let's hit Control F here and say leg config. So it's this one. Let's pull this off to the side and be sure not to drop it on some wires because it might reconnect. I will undo this move and just be sure that I'm moving it in one go like that. So be a bit careful with this. Okay, so you can see here the IKFK blend takes a float, so we need to split this vector3 to a float. Vector3 to float, take t, and you can use any of the axes here. I'm going to just use x, for example, into the blend, and we need to remember to add the name here as well with the prefix, else the mirroring won't work. And now we are good. I want to scale this down a little bit. So go to this node, hit P for the parameters. I found 0.2 to be a good value. And I also want to move it off to the side a little bit. Let's try X to 0.5. And now we can test it here directly in our graph. So this is the new one. And now you can see it's switching. And does it follow this one? It doesn't. So I was a little bit puzzled why it was down here and not up there. Let's try to debug. Did I parent it properly? So body 1 is up here. This one, I forgot a connection and I actually connected it wrongly. So xform to parent local, xform to parent local. And now the controller is up here. It's a little bit small, but we will fix that afterwards. Okay, now we can use this controller to switch. Now let's go down here. And you saw it was very slow and something is clearly breaking here. So the last step that we forgot to do was to add a reference tag. So let's open the node view again. And let's select all of the nodes that we have not changed. We did add a new promoted parameter here to the params. So let's keep that, but everything else except for these nodes should have the reference tag like that. Select them, edit tags, and it needs to be exactly named reference with all caps like that. And you can now see they have this tag. And now let's go back. You can see now it's working and we should have two controllers. They're just in the same place. So this is for this leg and here's for the right leg. So they are working. What we can do now is to use another configure controls to make them a bit more easy to see. So let's select these two and add them here. Actually, I could just take one of them and then say start. It's a bit easier to read this expression. Use the shape offset, and I'm just going to override the scale of it like that. And I'm going to do one more where I just take one of them. Let's hit the plus here. And I'm going to do shape offset, and I'm going to translate it in, in Y, this side. And I'm going to do the same with the other controller. So let's just copy this, paste it, shape offset, and I'm going to take this value here on the Y and just do it positive like that. And now we have one for each side. And just to make it really clear, it is also blending between the IK and FK. But you see now there is an issue where it's sort of overshooting the blend because the value is now more than 1, but the blend is not made to work with values below 0 or above 1. So what we can do is for both of them up here in this expression, use limits and add limits and say lock, and we are locking it to 0 and 1. If it says 0 and 0, it will actually lock the manipulator. I think we need to do it here as well. And I actually forgot a thing. We need to add the parm name, because else it wouldn't know what to lock. So that is T. So you can see now the manipulator here is only showing the X arrow and is clamped between 0 and 1, which is what we want. Okay, so that concludes this video in what's new in Houdini 21. I can promise you that there are a lot of other new features as well that are really cool. Check that out in the official What's New page on sideeffects.com. But these are some of the highlights I really like. So until next time, cheers.